Hello and welcome to another standard speaking video. This one is about primary school debating or junior school debating or elementary school debating. However, it's not just for primary school teachers. I think one of the best investments you can make in your high school debate club or in your high school level of oracy or indeed literacy is to help your feeder schools come up with some type of debating. It really does pay massive dividends, and similar to in investment or in economics, how a small amount saved 20 years ago becomes a much bigger amount than a lot saved now. Um, Working with kids when they're young and getting the basic fundamentals of debating down is hugely beneficial for your debate club. But of course, it's not just beneficial for your debate club, it's really, really good for the kids and really good for them immediately in that it will, within a couple of weeks, improve their writing and their listening and their structured thought. But it also has a long term impact on their likelihood to do more debating and public speaking in the future, but also, sorry, there's a fly. But also, it's very easy to do, and that's another reason why it's such a good return on investment. Because primary school debating is not technical. It's very very simple. It's a few basic ideas. You just have to sort of be good with primary school kids. You know, have a lot of patience, be friendly. But the actual debating side of it is very simple. So I'm going to talk today about why I think it's so advantageous to do some debating in primary schools and a few ideas on good lesson ideas and things to do with them. So I think a big thing to talk about right from the start is the goals with a primary school debate club or debate hour or debate class. I think are a little bit different than your typical goals at high school level. One of the big differences is that high schoolers will often have confidence issues when it comes to debating and public speaking, meaning that they might be reluctant to do some debating or public speaking, particularly the older that they get, and they might be quite self-conscious. I tend to find that's a much smaller problem with primary school kids. They tend to be a lot more gung ho and a lot less self conscious. But that is something that we're sort of weaponizing with our primary school debate club here, in that one of the reasons that people are so afraid of public speaking and debating the older and older they get is that they think it's going to go terribly for some reason, and that they haven't been taught it because our education system is bad. And so when these two things are combined, they think, well, I don't know how to do this, and I think it might go badly. And then if they also haven't done it before, then they're more likely to think it's going to go badly because it's never gone well before. But if in your final year of primary school you did 5, 10, a dozen debates, and they went fine, and actually they were quite fun, you're likely to be far less scared of public speaking and debating if someone then asks you to do it when you're 13, 14, 15, 18, because your first association of debating or your first association of public speaking was a pleasant one, which is really, really quite important. You know, if, a lot of the reason some adults hate sport is because they had a really crap PE teacher or gym teacher, and because they weren't very naturally sporty at primary school, sports were miserable for them, and so they grew up hating sports. But if they had a really nice, kind PE teacher and they had been playing sports for kids who were of similar ability level and they had been taught how to actually kick the ball or hit the ball with a racket or whatever rather than just being given a racket and told go figure it out. They likely would have a much more positive view of sports as an adult. So I think enjoyment should be a big goal of primary school debating, not just because, kids learn better when they're having fun and all the rest of it, but because it really does pay off when you want those people to start doing public speaking when they're older. Um, I think as well we shouldn't expect much in the way of rhetoric or analysis or critical thinking from 11 and 12-year-olds or from 10-year-olds, sorry, 10, 11-year-olds. It's just not very realistic, so it shouldn't be one of our goals because it's not a goal we're likely to hit. I think instead of hoping for decent rhetoric or particularly salient thoughts, all I'm really looking for is a little bit of structure in the thinking. You know, a little bit of here's my point, here's my explanation, here's my example, rather than here's a bunch of words and I'm going to float back and forth between various parts of a structured argument. Similarly, trying to really focus on them doing some more listening and being able to respond. We've all had that classic experience of maybe it's a year 7 class and you say if there are any questions, a bunch of students put the hand up, you take the first question, answer it, go to take the second question, and the second question is the exact same as the first question because that student wasn't listening. We want to avoid that as much as we can, and so I think really hoping that debating will improve our listening and our response, give them some attempts and practice at explaining their points or their thoughts, some more structure within that thinking, and a lot of enjoyment are some really good goals for primary school debating. And we don't have to aim much higher than that, I don't think. Um, some sort of more immediate advantages if you're trying to sell it to a primary school head teacher or a head of year 6 or something like that. It does make them significantly better at writing. And this isn't pie in the sky stuff. There's been some research on this, but it also shouldn't be that hard to intuit. I mean, ultimately, if you can't think clearly, it's really hard to write clearly. And doing a debate with some sort of structure reinforces that idea of thinking, okay, what's my first point? What's my second point? How can I explain my first point? Before I do this, I need to respond to the other person. Okay, response, first point, explanation, example, second point, and sort of imbuing kids with the ability to have a bit more structured thought will naturally make their writing a bit more structured and fluent. And when kids are at quite a young age, it's not really the quality of the ideas that distinguishes one kid from the other because the ideas tend to all be pretty poor. It's really, can they write things in a sort of cohesive structure that makes any sort of sense? So that really makes a big difference. And we've already talked about how normalizing debating can be really useful for when they're older, but in the sort of immediate sense, just as a year 6 or as a primary school kid, um, you will get much better SAT scores or 11 plus scores as a kid if you've done some debating. And that's, again, evidenced quite clearly not only in what top prep schools choose to use their time in, but again, if you look at what SATs require, year 6 SATs, or what they look for in 11 plus, it's a lot of the sorts of things that you naturally practice in debating, right? It's backing up your thoughts, it's being clear, it's being able to articulate yourself. I think that we can generate some interest in the world and some interest in issues through debating in primary school. I don't think anything too astounding is going to happen. I don't think everyone's going to become massively politically literate age 11. And again, I don't think that should be a goal. But I think you can get them thinking about some things. Maybe things they're already thinking about a little bit or hearing about the environment, school uniform, homework, exams, social media, pets, eating meat, things like that, can definitely be nurtured a little bit and brought out of kids a little bit, and I think that's definitely a very good thing. So there are significant advantages to doing a debating in primary school immediately, not just when the kids get older. And I think that one of the most common misconceptions and misapprehensions that primary school teachers have, and I mean, really all teachers have about debating, is that you have to sacrifice some time to do it. There's an opportunity cost. And if you're taking an hour of math or English or reading or whatever else, the kids are losing something somewhere to gain a different skill somewhere else, and that skill being speaking. But I think that's a wrong way to look at debating. If you take an hour a week to do debating, or an hour every 2 weeks, or an hour a week for a term or a half term, that 6 week or 12 week or longer investment, because it improves their writing, improves their listening, improves their ability to think about things before they talk, I wouldn't say that they're getting worse at whatever they're not doing to get better at debating. I would say that if you took that hour out of literacy or writing practice, you're likely to actually get them even better at writing, and they're now getting good at debating as well. Because I'm sure that if they're doing, reading time or writing time or textual analysis time or whatever it is, that they're already doing quite a bit of that and probably already have done quite a bit of that. And law of diminishing marginal returns, it would be useful if they could come up with alternative ways to learn these skills, and debating is just an alternative way to learn that skill. So I wouldn't see it as taking an hour away from something else. I would see it as, take the time out of something like reading or writing and notice that their writing and reading still gets better. So, in terms of the nitty gritty of how to teach primary school debating, I think that a dedicated hour a week, even if you're only going to do it for one term as opposed to the whole school year, is still the way to go rather than trying to do it in 15, 20-minute sessions or lunchtime clubs or 30-minute sessions. I've seen a lot of schools try to do that and it just doesn't work. There isn't enough time to do practice debates and to get the kids really focused on this one thing. So I would pick a sort of 1 hour, 60-minute block with the whole class, the whole form, 24, 30, 32 kids, however many it is, 35 if you're really unlucky, and use that dedicated hour for debating every week for a decent period of time, preferably a full term, 12, 13 weeks. And what to do in this hour? Start with trying to really get them to do PEEL or PEE with some debate topics. So try to really get them to come up with some points for or against the motion, explain those points, why is this true, why is this important, why does this matter, why does it make sense, and then give some examples or some evidence. So point, explanation, evidence. Um, if you can get them practicing that for a session or two, and then move on to having real debates where they have, a team of three on prop for the motion, a team of three against the motion, and they go first speaker of prop, first speaker of op, second speaker of prop, second speaker of op, third speaker of prop, third speaker of op, and they all speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. They'll probably speak for way less than that at the start, and give them simple topics. Banning homework, banning exams. Is social media good or bad? Should we eat meat? Is it good to be famous? Should we ban zoos? Should we lower the voting age to 12? Should kids be allowed to elect their head teacher? Um, things that are violent video games, should they be banned? Violent sports like boxing, combat sports, things that kids might have some thoughts on already. Um, limiting everyone to one return flight a year, to help the environment. Pedestrianising central London if you live in London. These sorts of topics, even though they aren't that technical or perhaps in some cases that realistic, they get the kids thinking about genuine issues, and the kids might be able to come up with some points for them without too much help, which is really nice. At that point, after sort of week 2 or week 3, it really is just about having a lot of practice debates. And over time, you can introduce things like rebuttal. My opponent said, but I disagree because. And you can introduce points of inquiry or points of information to make it a bit more interactive. You can also have audience questions. You can have the students operate as judges if they're not in the debate. So that way students are always doing something. They're either judging a debate or they're in a debate, so they're always active. And judging a debate will also get them better at note taking, and listening and thinking. And I think that this is a great thing about primary school. You don't need to do a lot of very technical lessons or technical drills. You can just do a lot of practice debates, and they'll really respond quite well to that for at least a term or two. I was working a lot in primary schools. I actually still am working quite a bit in primary schools right now, but over the last 2 3 years, I've done a lot of primary school work, and really, I had one class where I've been doing an hour of debating with them since the very start of year 5, and it was only really at the end of year 6 that I started to feel like I needed to do a bit more technical drills with them because the debates were kind of getting a bit stale because we've been debating for so long. I got a lot of road? No. A lot of string? A lot of rope? I'm not totally sure what that phrase I'm looking for is. I got a lot out of doing basic feedback. Try to explain that more. Try to be less reliant on your notes. Remember to practice during prep time. Not just talk about your points, but to practice your speech with your partner. Remember to think about different sorts of people who are involved and how they're affected. Um, I got a lot out of just getting the kids to do practice debates for a long time. And the great thing about little ones is because they almost never speak for more than a minute, and at the start they rarely speak for more than 30 seconds. If you cap them at 2 minutes, very few will go over each. Very few will go over the cap, and most will come nowhere near it. So that means that a practice debate is taking like 10 minutes, if it's 3 on 3. And if you're giving them 15 minutes to prep and then putting them in practice debates with the 6 kids per practice debate, even in a class of 30, you can get 5 debates done in an hour and 5 minutes if you have 15 minutes of prep and then 5 debates back to back. And so if you have an hour and 10 minute session at the start, you can really have kids debating almost every week. Now, they will start to speak for longer, particularly when you introduce things like rebuttal and POIs, and they get better. And you will get to the stage where you probably, if you give them all, give them 5 different debate topics and put them in teams and stuff, it'll take you a good 2 weeks to get through all the debates. But that's still fine. I mean, if a kid is doing a debate every other week, that's still a lot of practice. And in the meantime, they're prepping debates and judging debates. So I wouldn't aim too high in terms of what to teach as a debate teacher in primary school. I would just teach them the very basics, introduce concepts like rebuttal and POIs in later weeks, maybe week 3 or 4 for rebuttal and maybe week 6 for POIs. And you can have some scaffolded debates if you want. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But you can get a lot out of just doing practice with primary school kids. So some ideas for just lessons. Citizens' assemblies can be quite nice. This is sort of like a debate, except you put the kids into groups of stakeholders before you give them the topic. So, for example, if I was going to do a debate about pedestrianising central London, I might put the kids into 5 or 6 different groups, say motorists, cyclists, local business owners, environmentalists, and kids, right? And there's 5 stakeholder groups. So I'll put the kids into 5 different groups and say that they all have to argue for or against a motion based on being that group. And that can be a nice way to introduce stakeholder analysis and to sort of have a more simple or easier to access debate. I will get the kids to occasionally do individual speeches. If I could change one thing about the world, my favourite book is. And for those sorts of individual speeches, a lot of the time my focus is going to be on having a structure despite not having notes or having very little notes. So for my favourite book, I might say, try to follow the structure. My favourite book is, and then follow the structure of what is my favourite book? Why do I like it? How did I discover it? And when did I discover it? Or something like that. But basically just any sort of structure that gets them having a structured 1 minute speech that they haven't written out. Because we still want to avoid that. We don't want them reading aloud. That's not much use to anyone really. So we want to try and keep bridging that gap between structured thought but not writing out speeches. And practicing and rehearsing but not memorizing. Sometimes I will give the students information sheets so that they can access slightly more difficult topics like scientific testing on animals or abolishing the monarchy. And sometimes, if I think they'll be able to handle it, I won't give them any information sheets, like banning school uniform. Um, Work up to debates if you want, as in start with some more easy tasks. But you could probably start with debate in week one and it would be fine. It won't be a good debate, but very little bad is going to happen. So thanks. I hope that this video was helpful. I really do think that primary school debating is an underused tool in education, particularly in Britain. Uh, I think that primary school debating for the last couple of years of primary school can be really useful. A lot of value added, great preparation for high school, and some really good debaters I've known at primary school are kids that got even a kind of rudimentary experience of debating when they were very young, and maybe they caught the bug, got the interest from that, or maybe it just gave them the confidence to do it more in high school. But I have noticed a correlation there. So if you can help some primary school teachers in your feeder primary schools get some debating off the ground, if you as a high school teacher can host a little friendly competition between some of your feeder primary schools and help give a workshop or two, it really is a great thing to do. And if you can organise a primary school debating competition, kids love primary school debating competitions, and you can use your senior school students to judge it, which is a great way of like not having to pay for labour, but also it's really good for your senior school students to get some judging experience. So I really would encourage you to get involved in primary school debating if you can. And if you are a primary school teacher, I'd really encourage you to try doing some debating, because you don't have to be a debating expert or a public speaking expert. It's very simple to do. Just give it a go. You'll make a bunch of mistakes, but you'll figure it out, and the kids will really enjoy it. So even if you've literally never done debating before, you can still do it. And of course, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please leave them below or drop me an email. Thanks so much, and I hope that you start debating in a primary school very soon.